Welcome, KHTS. So now, are we officially on FM, or what's the deal? Were we supposed to say that? What's going on here, pal?
I think we're getting there. I think we can announce it, but we're still getting there. Not official.
Well, I think I've already announced it's the cat's out of the bag.
Yeah, a little bit too soon.
We're done. Excuse me. You might want to take your microphone off for a second, but good afternoon, the Valley of Los Angeles. And we have an amazing situation on today. We have our lovely co-host, Patty. Patty, how are you?
I'm doing great, thank you. How are you?
Okay.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you.
Our first show of the year, right?
First show, that's right.
Yeah.
That is correct. It's only January 4th. I was thinking last week, but you are absolutely correct. Not everybody knows Patty, but Patty is she's a senior mortgage advisor. That's correct?
Yes.
And you're working where? American Family Funding?
American Family Funding. Mm-hmm.
And is that a bank? Is that a mortgage company? What is that?
We are a direct lender. We're not a bank. We are a direct lender.
And is it specifically for homes or for any other commercial endeavors?
We do just residential, but we have relationships with commercial lenders where we just refer that out. But we are solely residential.
And you're an author, too.
I am an author, written 4 books.
Wow, 4 books. So
Yes.
I know one was Money Rules 101. Right?
Yes.
And
Yes.
that's basically mastering your money before it masters you. Okay, and that's basically for the teen market, young people that really haven't dealt with financial issues. What are some of the other books you've written?
Yeah, I've written another one that was for the teen market. It was called How to Ditch Your Allowance, Be Richer Than Your Parents. And then
I like that one.
And then, and then I wrote a children's book, The Feeling in My Belly of Peanut Butter and Jelly, and then 50 Ways to Thrive After Divorce. So very different.
Now, what is the peanut butter and jelly one about?
You know what? It's a really simple, sweet story about 2 friends. One of them is having a challenging day for no good reason, and the other is just going through her day and sharing what makes her happy, the simple things in life. So it's kind of a focus on what's right in their world versus what's wrong, and it helps them just focus on what makes them happy. And the feeling in my belly of peanut butter and jelly is one of the things that makes her happy.
Well, so how do you have time to write a book and work at the mortgage company and then come on the show?
And you know what? I just get it done. The books come slowly. You know, I've written. You know, it's been years of writing over the course of time. But I love to write. It's my creative outlet. It allows me to just inspire and help and share things that I think will help others. And so I find the time.
And when did you write your first book?
You know, The Feeling in My Belly of Peanut Butter and Jelly was technically my very first book. That was in the late 90s. And I just actually, in the last, I think it was 2 years ago, I actually published it because I didn't ever have an illustrator. And so I finally lined up with an illustrator who happened to be a good friend of mine from high school and got that out and got it published. So it sat dormant for many
But
years.
now it's there.
It's there. It's all on Amazon. Yes.
Well, that's cool. So
Yeah,
that's the co-host on
Thank you.
Ask Brien. Some people didn't know who she was, and periodically we'll reintroduce you to, because certain people have not watched the show. Now, for Ask Brien, for people that have not listened to the show in the past, Ask Brien basically is a show associated with the Ask Brien website, and Brien is Brien. Anyone who spells it YAN or IAN, they just don't know how to spell. I mean, I don't know. But Ask Brien, Brien, is basically the radio show is an extension of the website. So the website is basically to solve any problem. So if you have a specific question you want answered by the community, you can have the question answered by an expert. Like today we have a tax expert on our show. We'll be getting through to Mr. Lee in a second. You can ask any question. You can get an expert to answer it. You can get the community to answer it. There are videos on many different subjects. We have business classes as well as basically videos on every single business subject you need and ebooks. So basically, if you need to figure out, if you have a business problem, you come to Ask Brien and somebody there is going to answer it. Maybe multiple people will answer it. We also are adding on professors down the road. But basically, you can get your complete answer. That's what Ask Brien is for. Ask Brien radio show is an extension to that. It's an extension so that we can allow people through video, through radio, to get a better understanding of how we can learn something business-wise. Every week we will pick a different person to come on the show. We had a couple weeks ago, we had a great person on Facebook advertising and marketing, which every business owner needs. I mean, the subjects we have can adapt to whether or not you're a big corporation and you're working for somebody for a small company, or if you're just starting out. The programs that we go over and the teaching that we have are available for everybody. Now, today we have a very, very special guest. His name is Mr. Charles Lee, and Mr. Lee, I got a couple quick questions before we get into this. You are, so how long have you been, you're an accountant, correct?
Yes, I'm a CPA,
And how many years have you been practicing?
over 25 years.
And do you practice on your own, or do you practice with a firm?
I have my own practice.
And is it just you, or do you have other accountants working with you?
I have about 9 people in the office.
So that's decent size. And you're in Santa Clarita?
I'm in Santa Clarita.
And is your typical customer or client a small business owner, a medium-sized business owner, big companies? What's your typical person?
I actually have 2 practices.
Okay.
One is a CPA practice where we specialize in taxation issues, and most of our clients are small and medium-sized businesses. And then the other practice is Reliant Tax Consulting, Inc., where we specialize in working with over 300 CPAs, where we specialize in tax credits, such as high-end credits, research tax credits, deferring capital gains for 30 years, and a variety of other tax planning ideas that many local CPAs and smaller CPAs would not provide through their practices.
And did you start that organization, or you're just working with it?
I own both companies wholly, and Reliance started about 15 years ago. I spent the first 10 years of my career with the Big Four accounting firms, and after 10 years, you've had enough and learned a few things, and then back in 2002, started my own practice.
Spread your wings.
There you go.
Yeah.
So, and are you familiar with the new act?
You know, I read most of the provisions, and it is very complicated, some aspects of it. Most of the provisions will apply to 2018. Some will apply to later years. And a few of the provisions will apply to 2017. For example, if a business owner purchased equipment in the month of September, October, or November, they can get 100% Section 179 write-off. But again, most practitioners and taxpayers were probably not aware of that unless you actually read the law yourself.
So I actually, by the way, am an accountant and a lawyer, but question for you, not everybody knows what 179, Section 179 is. I remember back in the day, it was like at one time, it was like a $25,000 maximum deduction or $50,000. It was very, very little. So first of all, explain to people what a 179 deduction is.
Correct. When businesses purchase capital equipment, such as SUVs or manufacturing equipment or computers, you normally capitalize them and depreciate them over 5 or 7 years or what have you. But under Section 179, you're allowed to write off the full amount. So, for example, on the SUVs, the typical write-off was $25,000 under Section 179. Now, as of, I believe it was September 27th or 17th, if you purchased an SUV after that date, even though it was for 2017, you get to take the $25,000 write-off, but you could take what's called 100% bonus depreciation. So if you bought a $60,000 SUV, you take $25,000 off, and the remaining $35,000 is fully depreciable. So that means that you get a $60,000 write-off. Now get this. If you finance the whole purchase, or you put just a few $1,000s down and you bought a $60,000 SUV, you're going to get, if you're at the highest tax rate, over $20,000 to $25,000 tax refund for buying that SUV with very little or no cash down.
Wow.
That's awesome.
That's very cool.
And that's a deduction, correct, as opposed to a credit?
Correct. That's a deduction.
I remember years ago, I don't want to go too far back, but I remember years ago there was a time frame where some of the Mercedes SUVs had qualified for farm equipment. I remember people were taking certain tax credits. Do you remember that time period?
Right now there's over $30 billion of tax credits.
That's a lot.
Yes. Currently on the federal side, there's over 35 And on the California side, there's over 45 of these business tax credits that you can take. And of course, several of them that I specialize is the work opportunity hiring tax credit and the research tax credit for businesses that conduct qualified research expenses.
You're listening to KHTS, and before we go further, I want to. Not everybody understands the differentiation between a deduction and a credit. So why don't you explain? to
And a
people-
deferral.
Well,
Yeah, those.
Got it. So let's look at a typical tax return. You look at the income that's taxable, and then you subtract from the taxable income the expenses that are deductible, and so you get to net taxable income. Then you apply the appropriate tax rates to get to the income tax. Then you apply the credits, which act as like a dollar for dollar reduction of your tax, and the remainder of the balance you use withholdings or other cash payments to reduce your tax or pay your tax. So a tax credit is
the best.
Yes, because it's a dollar for dollar reduction of your taxes, but a write-off or deduction simply reduces the taxable income, and so you don't necessarily get a dollar for dollar benefit, but the benefit would be the amount of the deduction multiplied by the applicable tax rate.
And Patty was asking you about deferrals. So-
Correct. In the income tax world, there's really only three tax planning ideas that you have, or three types. The best
Don't
tax,
pay, don't pay, don't pay.
the best tax planning is to have exempt income or income that's not taxable. And there's very few income like that.
Could you give an example?
Sure. Believe it or not, when small insurance companies start their businesses, they can take an election to have the first $2.2 million of their premium income to be not taxable.
Wow.
Yes, that's an example. Now, the next best game or tax planning strategy is to have tax credits. Why? Like you said, don't pay tax by having tax credits to be applied against the tax credits. And we're all familiar with these tax credits as individuals. If you have children, you have the child tax credit, which
Earned
went up.
income.
There you go, earned income tax credit if you're in the lower income area. The child tax credit went up from $1,000 to $2,000 due to the new Tax Act. But on the business side, there are many, many tax credits. Research tax credits is one of the most common. In fact, I would guess that right now there's approximately $15 billion of research tax credits that are taken by a variety of businesses. Most of the tax credits will be going to the Fortune 1000 companies, but this is where I come in, where I work with the small and medium-sized businesses to provide these research tax credits for any business that's conducting qualified research here in the United States.
So what is qualified research?
For example, it has to be technical in nature, so many startups would have that. It would have to have a certain amount of uncertainty when you do your research. It can't just be testing for the sake of testing. It has to have, technology in nature and a business component to it. So I'll give you an example. If you are a clothing manufacturer, the designs that you create and test for the social acceptance is not qualified research expense. But once you have a design that you want to mass produce, maybe you have to produce it with a different type of fabric. And because it's a different type of fabric, you have to spend some time and effort in trying to figure out how to sew it, or how to dye it right, or how to make the folds come out right. And there's a lot of research, a lot of testing involved. That's the qualified research. So most businesses that are creating a product would have research expenses or qualified research expenses. Obviously, the biotechs and the pharmaceuticals and a lot of the startups, including the programming involved with whatever you're trying to produce, app companies, software companies, they also have qualified research expenses.
But that certainly would not apply to anyone in the service industry or wholesalers of that type, correct?
Not necessarily. In fact, I'm doing this case right now, next week, where you have a fairly decent-sized financial service provider, and they're hiring 6 programmers and engineers to come up with an ERP system where they'll be investing over $1 million to come up with a system that keeps track of their clients, that keeps track of a lot of the data, and that they're going to use it for operational purposes. And they have to pretty much program from scratch. And they're not sure if they're going to be able to create the system that they want, but they're willing to invest that $1 million to give it a try.
And is
Wow.
that going to be subject to a tax credit?
Correct. I wouldn't say all of that $1 million, but much of that $1 million will be qualified research expense. The qualified research expense tax credit rate is 20%, but if you look at the math, it's effectively more of 10% on the federal side and approximately 8% on the California side.
So with that said, these credits that you're speaking of, and we were talking about different, specific industries, are there special industries or certain industries that you focus on primarily or would benefit from these credits?
Correct. So let's talk about the other credit, and we'll come back to the research tax credit. The other credit is the Work Opportunity Hiring Tax Credit, WOTC, or WOTC as we call them. This credit is approximately $1.5 billion per year that businesses claim. So, Walmart, Home Depot, they all claim the WOTC credit. The WOTC credit is an income tax credit of anywhere of $2,400 per qualified new hire, up to approximately $10,000 if you hire a long-term food stamp recipient, for example. Otherwise, the typical new hire that would qualify would be a short-term food stamp recipient or a veteran. Now, the credit goes not to the individual employees, but it goes to the employer, who will use it to
Like
reduce.
a training expense?
There are training programs, like the California grant program. This is not a grant, but it's an actual income tax credit, similar to the research tax credit, where the income taxes of the businesses would be reduced by this credit. There are certain caveats, though. Unlike the research credit, you can't go back in time. On the WOTC, you must submit the paperwork to qualify the employee to what's called a WOTC coordinator. Each state has their own WOTC coordinator. Here in California is the EDD. You have 28 days from the hire date to submit the paperwork to determine that employee or new hire qualifies. And then once the employee qualifies, based upon the wages paid, the first $6,000 of wages paid, the credit is calculated at approximately 40% to get $2,400 for a typical new hire.
And what are the qualifications?
The WOTC hiring credit is a credit given to businesses or employers to give them an incentive to hire people that may not be the best employees in terms of being able to be hired or keep a job. So, for example, you're looking at, ex-felons. Ex-felons can qualify under this program for the employer. Long-term food stamp recipients, people who were recently discharged from the military. So it's a credit given to employers to hire these folks. Because once these folks are working, they're off of welfare or government assistance. They're paying income taxes. The employer is paying payroll taxes. So the government wants to give back some of their savings back to the businesses and encourage them to not only hire them, but keep them as well.
And we're listening to KHTS, and we're going to be taking a short break. Now? We got another minute.
Another minute. Let me ask you a quick question for this 1 minute. So this credit's going to apply to an employer who has one employee or hundreds, correct? Or is there a minimum?
The typical qualification ratio is approximately 20 to 25%.
Okay.
Now, certain industries, like the fast food industry, has a much higher percentage. I would say at least 50 or 60%. So we typically look for businesses that are hiring about 20 or more per year. And that means that on average, 4 or 5 folks will qualify, and that means that the credit would be approximately $10,000 to $12,000 per year.
Okay. So that
And why wouldn't Ma and Pa, who just hires one person, want to be able to try to get that credit?
Because if that person doesn't qualify or is not a qualified new hire, then there is no credit.
so it's a numbers game,
Correct.
basically,
Correct.
So it's taxes.
There you go.
literally and figuratively. Yeah. When we come back, I want to ask you about some of the most common missed opportunities for these credits,
Sure.
and just watching that. So we'll come back.
You've You've seen them on Spike TV's Bar Rescue. Now experience the Cajun Belle in Canyon Country. The Cajun Belle, a terrific mix of SoCal Creole and the most flavorful handmade cocktails in our valley. It's the happening place, beginning with Blues Night every Wednesday from 7 to 11. Thursday is karaoke night with all-night happy hour featuring $1 tacos. Friday is Ladies Night with the coolest DJ in town. Check out live cover bands every weekend. The Cajun Belle on Soledad opposite the Canyon Country Post Office.
City of Hope is a leader in cancer research and treatment, and there's a City of Hope location right here in Santa Clarita, eliminating a major barrier in the fight against cancer: distance to quality care. Santa Clarita has the advantages of City of Hope's renowned clinical expertise, compassionate care, and access to clinical trials. Find out more at cityofhope.org/Santa Clarita or call 661-799-1999.
Something big is coming to Castaic.
Is it a dinosaur, Bob?
No, Blanche.
Is it the 2020 Olympics?
No.
I know. We're finally hosting the World Cup.
No, silly. They're building Castaic High.
Bob, no way.
Way. Go visit CastaicHighProject.com. You'll get all the latest details.
What's that web address again, Bob?
CastaicHighProject.com.
Again?
CastaicHighProject.com.
Bigger than a dinosaur?
That's right. CastaicHighProject.com.
Have you ever been in the middle of cooking on your barbecue and ran out of propane? It can be so frustrating. Don't ever run out of propane again. Call Plumbing by Kirk to set up your free estimate to find out if your barbecue can be retrofitted to hook up to natural gas. Plumbing by Kirk can assess your situation for options to hook up your natural gas line so that you'll never run out of gas in the middle of cooking again. Give us a call, 263-6519, 263-6519, or go online at plumbingbyKirk.com.
My dad is the best plumber ever. Call Plumbing by Kirk.
California Credit Union, the only credit union in Santa Clarita focused on our educational community. California Credit Union offers low rates on loans for personal and business services, along with financial services for teachers, students, staff, and families. Free checking and very low new and used auto loan rates.
California Credit Union, your personal credit union, located in the River Oak Shopping Center next to Target.
Visit us and open an account today, insured by NCUA, an agency of the federal government.
The Las Vegas shooting created awareness for all of us. Awareness to upgrade security at concerts. Awareness for clearly marked exit signs. Awareness on how to evacuate safely. And awareness to have tighter hotel security. The law offices of Owen Patterson Owen are working diligently with Las Vegas victims to prevent future tragedies from occurring, as well as protecting the rights of Las Vegas victims to receive financial assistance for their ordeal. If you know someone impacted by the shooting, visit opolaw.com. That's opolaw.com.
KHTS, your hometown station.
Welcome back. And we have my co-host, Patty. Patty, how you doing?
I'm doing great. Great segment today with Charles.
We have an excellent person here, Mr. Charles Lee.
There's so much enthusiasm with that name.
I try to pump it up. That's why we use Rocky. So you had a question to Charles.
Yeah, we were sort of ending the last segment with some of the most common missed opportunities that you see in your practice with types of credits that people miss out on, whether they're dealing with their CPA who aren't familiar with the credits or not dealing with the process. Share with us.
Or people that haven't hired Mr. Lee.
Or exactly.
Correct. One is the research tax credit. Okay, so if there's any business that's conducting research to improve a product, to come up with a product, or if you're programming a game software, for example, the more uncertainty there is in terms of the research you have to conduct in order to come up with these products or services, the more likely you have qualified research expenses. And again, typically, the credit rate is 20%, but if you look at the math, it's actually about 10% of your qualified research expense on the federal side and approximately 8% on the California side. So you can actually double up and get approximately 18% of your qualified research expense as an income tax credit to reduce your income taxes dollar for dollar. And if you're an S corp, an LLC, a sole proprietorship, the credit will actually reduce your personal income taxes.
So if you had $100,000 of income as an S corp, or as an LLC, or as a self-employed person, all right, and you had $20,000 of research, would you take off the $20,000 off the? I thought you take it off the total taxes. So on $100,000, let's say the example is you're paying $30,000 in income taxes. You take the $20,000 off the 30, correct?
Correct. If the research credit is $20,000, subject to certain limitations, you can apply the $20,000 against that $30,000 of income taxes.
So that's the dollar for dollar you spoke of earlier.
Correct. And often we can go back 3 years on the federal side and 4 years on the California side to actually file amended returns and claim refunds. And in fact, one of the best situations to claim the research credit is if you have an open examination. If you're being audited by the government, that's one of the best times to claim it to the extent that you have it.
Well, 3 years and 4 years, that's pretty generous. That's
Correct.
nice.
Correct. The government has 3 or 4 years to audit you, and therefore you have 3 or 4 years to claim your refunds.
I like it.
So even though you were not claiming it 3 years ago, you can all of a sudden decide that you were claiming it now?
Absolutely.
So if somebody hadn't gone to you, didn't have you as a client. So for instance, I think if anyone gets audited, they should call you.
Sure. They have nothing to lose and everything to gain. Typically, CPAs or your tax return preparer, they're good at preparing basic tax returns and providing basic accounting services, maybe some payroll and bookkeeping. But they would normally not specialize in these kind of income tax credits because they probably don't have a large client base where most of their clients would be producing this kind of credits, and therefore they really can't make money off of it. And that's why I actually work with over 300 CPAs to act as their tax credit branch or their tax credit arm of their practice.
And that's great. And like we were saying earlier, we can't all be specialists. Like if, you in the attorney world, you can't be an attorney of everything. You specialize in obviously different forms. So it totally makes sense that within the CPA world, which is very complex, that they have specialists.
And your refund opportunities are not limited to just tax credits. The new Tax Act actually repeals what's called a Section 199, Domestic Production Activities Deduction. But this is another example where you can go back 3 years on the federal side only to claim your refunds. And I'll give you an example. About a year ago, I met a manufacturer where his CPA was not aware that manufacturers can claim this deduction. And we amended 3 years of the returns and produced over $210,000 of federal income tax refunds.
Wow.
Yes.
Huge.
So if you're a manufacturer, a fabricator, an assembler in the United States, and that activity is conducted here in the United States, then automatically the 9% of your net taxable income is not taxable. In other words, you get a deduction of 9% of your net taxable income. So let's say $2 million came in, $1 million went out in expenses, you're left with $1 million, then $90,000 is your tax deduction in that scenario. And unfortunately, many CPAs just don't understand it, or maybe they kind of know it and they didn't quite understand what the impact or the benefits are, and they just kind of passed it. And so I come in and educate the CPA and the taxpayers, and I get their 3 years of refunds.
That's awesome. So the next question I have is, why do you believe that people are so uninformed about the tax code? Is that just because they're just not familiar with these credits? Is it not something that's taught in the...
Well, people talk about tax simplification and how the new tax laws would simplify the tax code. If you ever seen a printed code, it's about this thick and it's 2 volumes.
We are on radio. We are on radio, so even though we have Facebook Live, you might want to just
3 inches by 3 inches.
Correct. It's like 7 inches thick. The tax laws are extremely complex, and it would be difficult for one CPA or a single body CPA to know all the tax codes, credits, special deductions, and what have you.
Yeah.
How about the chief of the IRS?
He would know what he knows.
Yeah, that's incredible. So great opportunity for small business owners, medium-sized, large, obviously, business owners to capitalize on credits, which essentially is, I don't want to say free money. It's not free money, but it's extra funds, if you will. Is that a fair
Correct.
statement?
On the federal side, there's over $30 billion of these tax credits claimed by probably no more than 120,000 businesses.
Wow. That's a very small
And,
percentage.
and
of-
there are, according to the Irish statistics, over 30 million employers out there.
Wow.
And how many people qualify that don't use the credits? Estimate.
It's hard to say, but I would guess that there would be millions of businesses that are eligible. But perhaps the amount of credit may be so small they're passing on it, or they're just simply
They
not
just
aware.
don't know. Yeah. What a missed opportunity.
Yes.
Wow, that's fantastic. You had a question, Peter, about
Yeah, I have a question.
S Corp?
Yeah, so under the new tax act, okay, they basically they're giving a 20% deduction to pass through as well as self-employed, and service companies are being treated differently. So I'm just trying to understand. First of all, let's just go over. I have a background, but let's go over the background. So what is the difference between a C corp and an S corp? Because not everybody knows that.
Correct. For legal purposes, a corporation is a corporation, but strictly only for income tax return purposes, a corporation can designate itself as a subchapter S corporation, and therefore the corporation itself is not taxed on the taxable income, but the owners of the S corp are taxed. So I'll give you a simple example. Let's say that the taxable income is $1 million. A typical C corp under the old laws will be taxed at a maximum of 35%. If you have the same taxable income of $1 million for an S corp, the S corp itself does not pay an income tax. It's just not applicable. There's no concept of income tax to the S corp, and the income of $1 million is allocated to the owners of the S corp, and it's taxed at the individual level as if the individual owners earned that income.
Basically through a K-1, which is
Absolutely.
now. Well, you do have to pay an $800 tax to the Franchise Tax Board, even if you're an S corp. So that's a different tax, correct?
Correct. Most states do impose certain minimum taxes. Unfortunately, here in California, $800 is the minimum tax imposed for both a C corp and S corp, even though they have no taxable income or not even a business activity. As long as they're registered to business in the state of California, the $800 is imposed on the California C corps and S corps.
Isn't that true for LLCs as well?
Absolutely. Same with the LLCs. Although LLCs have technically a fee, I think it's a tax, on the gross receipts, which could be up to about approximately $12,000.
And that what kicks in at what, $500,000?
If your income is over $250,000,
$250,000.
then $900. If it's over $500,000, then usually about $2,500, in addition to the $800.
So if somebody wants to decide whether or not to be a C corp or an S corp under this new act, let's explain the differences. So the old act, my understanding is, correct me if I'm wrong, my understanding is that under the old act, C corporations were paying 35%.
Yes.
Maximum rate.
Yes.
And now the maximum rate is down to 21%.
Yes.
So that's a huge savings.
Yes.
Now, on the S corp, my understanding is you're getting a 20% deduction.
Correct.
So with the 20% deduction, does it make sense now maybe to consider being a C corp?
The new tax laws will make the gap between the overall taxation of a C corp and an S corp more close. But I would guess that most small business owners will still go with the S corp concept, primarily because with a C corp, you're still taxed on the income whether you as an individual owner receive it or not. Whereas in the S corp case, you're not taxed at the entity level, but you're taxed at the individual level. And therefore, if you look at the overall net or effective tax rate, it's still slightly higher on the C corp side than on the S corp side.
Is there any way that you can keep money in a C corp and not have to pay taxes on it?
Oh, of course. In fact, one of the benefits of having a C corp is that you're taxed on your earned income at the company level, whereas the drawback of an S corp is whether the individual owner pulls the money out or not, whether they distribute it to himself or herself or not, you're still going to be taxed on the earned income.
So is there a deferral then until you take the money out?
Yes, on the C Corp side, but keep in mind, you are taxed at 21%,
No matter what.
no matter what. And then when you pull the money out, you're taxed at, again, depending on your
Tax rate.
income level, 15 to 20% plus the bonus of 3.8% in addition. to that.
And that 15% is based on the fact that it's a dividend?
Correct, a qualified dividend.
So it's a capital investment return, basically.
There you go.
So what if a company, in making that decision whether to do S or C Corp, and they have, a pool of employees, is one better than the other as far as like doing a 401k for the employees or doing benefits? Does it make a difference between those two, S or C Corp?
There are certain restrictions for S Corp owners to participate in certain fringe benefits. But generally speaking, most small and medium-sized businesses are S Corps. Now, obviously, for the Fortune 1000 and any publicly traded corporation, they must be a C corporation, a traditional corporation. And of course, with the new tax law, the higher tax that is normally paid by an individual that uses a C corp structure, the gap is reduced. But at the end of the day, you'll pay slightly less tax still by using an S corp. And of course, if you use less wages to pay yourself and take the remainder of the earnings as a distribution with an S corp structure, generally you'll be better off than a traditional C corp.
Well, because you can limit your payroll tax?
There you go.
So with anything, referring out to a specialist makes the most amount of sense. Everyone's going to have their own personal, unique circumstances where it makes sense to talk to an expert like yourself to determine whether it makes sense to do an S corp or C corp, and of course talking to an attorney as well, because there's legal aspects to things as well. So
It's more taxation, though.
the bigger part is taxation. What about liability?
Well, because that doesn't have any effect. What we're talking about here is an S corp and a C corp. S corp is actually it's an election that you have to make. In fact, you have to make it. You can actually make it at any time, but in order to be effective in that tax year, you have to make it. I believe it's within 75 days of that tax year, or if in a prior year. Usually, when you're incorporating your business, you'll do it within a certain time frame. But that's just for tax purposes only. There's no consequences at all legally. It's the same issue whether or not you're an S corp or a C corp.
Okay, good to know. So on that note, I know we have some more time, but let's just go ahead and give everyone your contact information as far as the best way to reach you for questions.
Sure. Please call me at my office, 661-775-5923. 775-5923, or shoot me an email at charles.lee@relianteasy.com. CHARLES.LEE @RELIANTEZ.com.
And we'll repeat that again at the end of the show in case you missed it, but I think it's fantastic what you can offer, and the savings are tremendous.
So, big question here is, talking about all these tax credits, you're talking about many accountants don't know about these tax credits. So if you don't know, how do you ask? So how did you get involved?
Really simple. Just ask your tax return preparer. I own a business, and I understand there are certain tax credits that I may be eligible for. Do you know what they are? And of course, at times they may be applying some of these credits already that you just are not aware of. And other times they'll say, I really don't specialize this on those tax credits. So if you have a specialist, go with them. And you can also always call me, and it may be that I already work with your CPA. After all, I do work with over 300 CPAs here in the state of California. But feel free to call me or email to me, and I'd be more than happy to answer your questions and see what you qualify for.
Are there any credits that apply to retailers?
Yes, large employers can use the WOTC credit. I have another retailer client that has about 40 locations where, again, they're putting a new point-of-sale system. It's not a CAN system. It's a system due to the nature of their business and the locations and how they operate, where they have to spend approximately $1.5 million in programming the system, and it's taking them about probably well over 10 months to get the system to do what it's doing, with lots of failures. The more failures there are, the more likely that you did quite a bit of research to get it right.
Do you see this in restaurants, bars, or is that something that doesn't really apply?
I do a lot of fast food restaurants for the Work Opportunity Hiring Tax Credit. Typically, any business that hires 20 more people, you do the WOTC. Businesses that do some kind of research, manufacturers, if you do a lot of programming, if you're hiring a lot of engineers and consultants, if you are working on a patent, if you're hiring an intellectual property attorney, chances are you have qualified research expenses. If you're in any kind of science or technical industry, such as pharmaceuticals, biotech,
So hospitals?
If you're a startup company, any business where you're spending money to improve your product or process, chances are you have research expenses.
Fantastic.
Now, how many years have you been on your own?
15 years on my own, yes.
And you said you were with one of the big four prior to that?
I started with Ernst & Young and KPMG, and then finally with Deloitte & Touche, and here I am.
You skipped down on Price Waterhouse?
After 3, you've had enough. 3 out of 4 is enough.
And so, what is the biggest difference between working for one of the big four and working on your own?
Well, in the big four is very structured, and you just have to work hard and meet your numerical goals. In the real world, and I call the big four the la la land.
Is that similar to billable hours?
Yes, billable hours, which I'm sure you're familiar with. In the real world, you make what you want to make, and you have fixed expenses that you have to take care of. But it's your own business, it's your own clients, and you can treat them as the way you want to be treated.
You have more control.
Absolutely.
We're going to be back very, very shortly here and conclude our show.
Drug and alcohol use can lead to troubles at school or work, relationship problems, financial or legal difficulties, medical and psychiatric issues. I'm Bob Sheritz, the host of the Way Out Recovery Hour, airing every Monday at noon. The Way Out Recovery Hour features prominent guests and organizations discussing the epidemic of drugs and alcohol in our valley. Don't miss the Way Out Recovery Hour every Monday at noon. Asking for help is the first step. There is the way out.
Life's not meant to feel complacent. It's meant to make you feel alive. The youth ministry at the Church on the Way Santa Clarita believes that students can belong to the group, where they will help them believe they have a purpose in Christ and become all that He has created them to be. They want you to see God's power come alive in our generation. They love meeting new people, so go hang out with them. Doors open at 6 p.m. and service starts at 7 p.m. every Wednesday night. For more information about the Church on the Way Santa Clarita and what's happening through the end of the year, visit tcotwsc.org.
Buying your home can sometimes be challenging. That's why Charlene Gill with CSMC Mortgage is your Santa Clarita mortgage expert. What's important to you is to secure a loan at the best possible rate, to have a professional guide you through the process, and to close on time. Charlene's 23 years in the mortgage industry and her personal expert knowledge in the Santa Clarita Valley makes her your mortgage expert. Contact Charlene at hometownstation.com/Charlene. That's hometownstation.com/Charlene.
There's only one Santa Clarita plastic surgeon who is Yale trained and board certified, Dr. Justin Heller.
To be a board certified plastic surgeon like myself, what that truly entails is about 5 to 7 years of honed surgical training in reconstructive, all areas, as well as aesthetics, which means your facelifts, your breast augmentations, your body contouring, true training, and board certification. In fact, that's the only board certified area that can be achieved in this realm.
Dr. Justin Heller, warm, understanding, always available for guidance because he's local. HellerPlasticSurgery.com.
Cancer is unpredictable. You need a cancer center that's several steps ahead. For over a century, City of Hope has been advancing science that saves lives. From 4 of the top cancer-fighting drugs to stem cell transplants with unparalleled survival rates. Rather than just heal the body, City of Hope helps you re-become the person you were before cancer. City of Hope has 15 locations throughout Los Angeles. For the location nearest you, visit cityofhope.org.
Hometown.
They're amazing, and every single one of their songs is amazing, except for like one.
Your hometown station.
Welcome back, and we have our co-host Patty. Patty, oh, she's going over there.
I'm taking care of the air conditioning.
Jack of all trades over here.
Yeah, I multitask well.
And we have our distinguished colleague, or guest, I should say, Mr. Charles Lee. And Charles is running a very, very, very high-end tax practice, and he has many accountants that are coming to him. So he doesn't actually, although he does get involved, I guess, with regular business people, a lot of his people that he's getting involved in are actually accountants. So an accountant has a problem, they come to Mr. Lee.
There you go.
300 CPAs, that's impressive. So tell us, let's come back full circle for a minute about the tax deferral. I want you to go a little bit deeper with that conversation that we were having.
So tax deferral simply means that you're receiving income today and not paying the tax today, but receiving or paying the tax into the future. So I'll give you an example. If you sell any capital assets, you sell your home, business, even Bitcoins, there is a way to sell it, realize your gain, but not pay the capital gains tax until 30 years from now. That's an example of a deferral. Other example is, a 401k plan or any retirement plan where you're putting money in now, you're getting the tax deduction, but you're not paying the tax until you pull the money out when you retire.
So that 30-year delay is obviously a beautiful thing, and that's something you specialize in and you can help other CPAs with, obviously.
Correct. Under Section 453 of the installment sales method provisions, you can defer a gain up to 30 years or longer, depending on how you structure it when you sell capital assets.
And define a capital asset.
It's basically any asset other than inventory, accounts receivable. Just about any asset is generally a capital asset.
Well, what about asset? What about if I own 1,000 shares in Facebook?
Under Section 453, although that is a capital asset, publicly traded stock cannot be deferred using the installment sales method. However, there is a way to structure where you can, and we can talk about that later on.
Well, for that, you're going to have to pay a very big fee.
That's that's a whole nother show, right?
There you go.
Now, when I refer to typically, and what I thought you were referring to on deferral, like for instance on a house, are you referring to like the rollover? So, for instance, I buy a house for $300,000, I have a $200,000 gain, and then I buy a house for $700,000. That I'm rolling my gain into the new house. Is that what you're referring to, a deferral, or something different?
Something different. That would be maybe an example under the old rules, but under the current Section 121 rules, if you sell a house once every 2 years, or you lived in the house 2 out of 5 years, then up to $500,000 of the gain is just not taxable. But that rollover rule is an old rule that's superseded by the current 2 out of 5 year rule.
So it wouldn't apply?
No.
Anymore. And okay. Sorry about that. And what about so deferrals also, I guess the biggest one category that I'm aware of are retirement accounts. The IRA, the KEO, the 401k, defined benefit plans, whatever. So are you familiar with those? What do you think is which one offers you the highest deferral rate? So in other words, if I make $700,000 a year, I can take off the highest percentage. Which plan would I want to be in?
You get a 401k plan with the profit sharing, and you get a defined benefit plan. We call that the combo plan. Defined benefit plan is simply a fancy word for the traditional pension plan. And of course, everyone knows what a 401k plan is. And of course, you get the profit sharing, the matching there. You get all three plans together into one plan, and that will give you the biggest bang for the buck in terms of the retirement benefits.
So in a defined benefit plan, what percentage can you deduct?
It all depends on your age. It depends on the average past 3 years of earned wages. But typically, you see $50,000 a year to maybe up to $200,000 a year. It just depends on your facts and circumstances.
Is $200,000 limit, top dollar limit?
It's based upon actuarial calculations. So it's not necessarily the same dollar amount every year. It just depends on how much is in the plan already and how much is left to be funded, and your age, and a lot of moving factors here to determine that. A lot of moving parts.
And then you can, is that similar to an annuity when you're taking it out in terms of how it's taxed, or?
Yes, once you receive your retirement benefits, it is taxable income, and usually the benefits are a fixed dollar amount of retirement income.
And is there a time frame that it has to be paid out?
Generally, you can take it out after age 65.
But do you have to have it all taken out by a certain age, or as long as you live?
No, you don't have to take it out all at once.
And if you pass away, do your heirs get the benefit of that tax deferral?
You know, that's a good question. I don't
I like
specialize
to
in
ask good
this.
questions.
But we can leave that to an estate tax attorney to figure that out.
Certainly.
So we're wrapping up here. Just another minute to go. Tell us again where and how we can reach you.
Please call me at my office, 661-775-5923, or email me at charles.lee@reliantez.com.
So Reliant Tax here in Valencia is where your offices are located. Actually,
Yes.
a few buildings
I thought
down
we were in
from ours.
Newhall.
Well, in our office in Valencia. We're just a couple buildings aside from each other. So, yeah, great to have you. Thank you so much for sharing that. If you're a CPA and you want to talk to Charles about these credits, I encourage you to reach out to him. And if you're a business owner, I encourage you to speak to your CPA to determine if, in fact, they're taking these credits for you. If not, explore this with Charles. Thank you so much for coming on. What a wealth of information. And hopefully we can have this link up soon so those who missed the show can refer back to it later.
My understanding is it'll be up within the next day. But if you have any tax questions that you want to send over to us, we can refer them over to Mr. Lee, and he can get back to you.
Sounds great. Thank you for having me
Awesome.
over.
Thank you.